I started to get the idea that I wanted to spend more time out of England when I was in my early 50s. I'd already gone through my career, my marriage, and my divorce, and I was living more quietly than I ever had before. I just seemed to be going through the motions of daily life, and I didn't really expect much else to happen. I'd always been someone who took small trips when I could, usually within Europe, but I never had the thought about actually living there or anywhere else. That began to change when I spent more time in Portugal, a country I went to so many times before. I found that it was close enough to England to feel slightly familiar, but different enough that I could see myself spending a lot more time there. The weather, for a start, was better, the food was much better, and I found that life seemed to be a lot more laid back than it was back at home. I stayed there longer than I planned when I was there for 2 weeks originally, and that just kept getting extended time and time again. And that was when I started to notice that the people who were working there, many of them weren't actually from there. There seemed to be so many young Brazilians, and at first I didn't really think much of it. They were just people who had moved to work like anyone else did. But then I started to notice a pattern. They seemed to be the ones working in restaurants, behind bars, cleaning hotel rooms, and taking on jobs that no one else seemed to really want to do. They often worked long hours and shared apartments together, and many of them were living on very low wages that just about kept them afloat. I would speak to some of them in passing, as you do when you're going out and interacting in your daily life, and often you'd find that the story was the same. They were sending money back home because their families were depending on them. I'd never been to Brazil and I never thought anything of it, but the more time I spent in Portugal, the more I began to see Brazil in a very different way. It was no longer just a football team and beaches and carnival on television. It was a country where so many people felt that they had to leave just to find something better. I'd spent my whole life in England, never considering that I would ever meet anyone from Brazil or that it would mean anything to me personally. Portugal was only ever meant to be some kind of place I went to spend time in, somewhere I could pass part of the year and not feel weighed down by the same things that happened at home all the time. I used to get tired of that, and I got bored of it quickly. I went to lots of small restaurants, I sat in the cafes around Lisbon, and I liked to walk around the narrow streets with the historical element that really attracted me. And I did get used to the slower pace, and I loved it. It was actually in one of those small restaurants that things did change for me. To start with, they changed well, but over time things would deteriorate. Because when I was there, I actually met someone. She was 26, working long hours every single day, and she had the same story as many of the others. She was just trying to earn enough money to send home. At first, I noticed her only as someone doing her job. She was always polite to the customers, and she spoke broken English when she had to, but Portuguese was what she spoke the most. I always noted that she moved quickly from one table to the next, and it was as if she was robotic in a way because she was doing this, yet you could tell that it wasn't her dream. I went to that place quite a few times, and I found myself going back more often after that, because I realized that I saw something in her. She never seemed to be complaining when things were busy. She never seemed to show frustration when people in the restaurant started to be angry with her if something went wrong. It was always just her living the motions and just accepting what came her way. At least that's what I felt before I'd even spoken to her. I'd not expected to notice someone like that, especially at my age, and I certainly had not expected to feel anything beyond a polite acknowledgement. But over time, and the more I went back, it became more than just wanting to go and witness her working. The more I saw her, the more I wanted to speak to her. And the more I spoke to her and started speaking to her after I went for a few times, I did start to feel something different. That was how I ended up meeting her, and it was everything that followed that started to become possible to make this something more than I thought it was. And it would lead to my ultimate downfall and completely destroy my life and everything that I had spent years accumulating. We did start talking more whenever I went to that restaurant. Usually it was just about little things, how long she'd been in Portugal, which part of Brazil she was from, and why she was working there in the first place. She told me she'd been in Lisbon for over a year, and she was living with 4 other Brazilians in a very small flat, and she had no idea how long she was going to be there. She said it was because of money, and every month she sent home the vast majority of what she earned to keep her family afloat. When I listened to her, I did ask questions, and each time the conversation seemed to grow longer. Sometimes when her shift ended, we would talk more, and I don't know why I was drawn to this. It just felt so interesting and different. Sometimes we would walk together after she finished work, just around the block or near the centre, and we started to talk about more personal things. She told me about her parents and how her father had been ill and that the family couldn't afford proper treatment. She said she was always worried. Also, her younger brother had to drop out of school to work just to be able to help out, and her mother had to work oh so hard just to be able to keep things going. I could see that it was something that weighed on her, but it wasn't like she was asking anything from me. It was as if she wanted someone to listen, or that's what it felt. That did make me want to see her a lot more. So I started inviting her out on nights out. When she was not working, which wasn't very often, but I was staying in Portugal longer just to be with her. We went for coffees in the afternoons and walked in the park, and I took her to eat at places close to where she worked that she wouldn't have been able to afford herself. And soon it felt like this was a fantastic thing that we had going. I'd not been with anyone in years. At least no one that I could see myself actually loving. Yet suddenly here was someone young and open and willing to share her life with me. It was amazing, and to start with though, I thought it was casual. I thought it might just stay that way. But one night after dinner, she asked me back to her flat, and that's when things began to change between us. I was not expecting what happened that night, and when it did, I was both shocked and incredibly happy. She did live with those other girls from Brazil, but at the time they weren't at home. And as soon as we walked inside, it felt very strange, but also incredibly exciting. She poured us both a drink and put some music on, and we just sat on the couch. We'd been talking all night already about her family again and how she didn't know if she'd ever be able to see them again because she needed to save so much money to be able to return. It felt very difficult for her, and she felt trapped in a way because everything she did, she didn't get much in return. I told her about my own life and how I was divorced, and feeling like I reached an age where I didn't expect much else to happen for me. I just wanted something quiet and peaceful. We sat there for a moment, and then she leaned in, and all of a sudden, I can't believe what's going on. Something like this hadn't happened to me for a long time, and I was surprised because I wasn't even looking for it, and I didn't think it would happen to me. I couldn't believe I found myself in this position. It was in a way like I had my old self back, yet somehow it was with this amazing Brazilian girl that I just met in Portugal. It was completely unexpected, and I definitely didn't plan for it to happen, yet I just found myself feeling young again, while at the same time feeling like this could actually be a very serious relationship. It could be something great. These were the thoughts I was thinking, and in the morning, the whole situation starts to feel a bit strange. Extreme in a way at the same time. She was so much younger than I was, but neither of us seemed to even be concerned about it, and it didn't matter. It was as if we were just two people who somehow found each other, and we could meet each other's lives and make our lives better. It is very difficult to explain, but this was the life I was never expecting, but the problem was I wanted it more than I ever wanted anything before. After a month in Portugal, things between us had become very serious, and I started to question myself as to how did this happen. What began as me stopping into a restaurant just to see her had turned into something that was ever so much different than I expected, spending most of our free time together. I'd originally planned to go back to England after 6 weeks, but I just kept pushing the date back because I really didn't want to leave her. After a while, she started opening up more about her life, and I wanted to hear everything she had to say. She told me that her dream was to never really live in Portugal. She was only there because it was possible to earn more money and send it home. She said she always preferred Brazil and that's where she wanted to be. She was from close to Recife, where her family lived, but she had no way of making it happen to be there because there was never enough money. She told me often about her father being ill and how her mother worked all the time just to make ends meet, and the difficult situation where her brother had to leave high school just to help out. She felt guilty being far away, yet she felt guilty when she was there and not being able to provide. When I listened, I realized how much she was doing for them, and it made me want to be there for in a way that I never thought I could. I had money saved, which was quite substantial for myself, and I told her that maybe we could actually go to Brazil together. It wasn't meant to be anything permanent, but it was a chance for her to see her family and for me to see where she came from. At first, I could tell she didn't believe I meant it, but when I showed her that I was willing to cancel my ticket to England and book flights to Brazil instead, she actually cried and hugged me as if to say that meant so much to her. It wasn't a big decision for me, but I'd already decided that being with her was worth more than everything else I had, so what was the point in returning to England? I wanted to show her that I was serious about us being something more than we had at the moment. When we arrived in Brazil, I could feel straight away how different it was from anywhere else I'd been before. We landed in Recife, direct from Lisbon, and her family met us at the airport, and even though I didn't understand Portuguese, I could see how much it meant that she had come back. They lived in an extremely poor neighbourhood, and I'd never stayed anywhere like it, but it didn't bother me because I was with her and I wanted to see her world as it really was. We didn't stay with her family though, we checked into a hotel close by. The streets were crowded, but different sorts of crowds than you'd see anywhere else. The houses around where she was from were so small and extremely basic, and everything felt so different compared to how I had been used to things in Europe. At the same time, it felt exciting, yet I couldn't understand and explain the exact feelings because here she was from, and it seemed so difficult. Her family, though, was so friendly and welcomed me as best they could. Her mother cooked meals for us when we went to visit, and her brother took me around and showed me the area. Her father, unfortunately, wasn't well and was very weak, but he did try to talk to me with her help for translations. I found myself going and enjoying it. I didn't expect to enjoy it this much, but I was. Instead of feeling out of place, I actually felt included. I could tell she was so happy being back home. Seeing her happiness, that made me fall even more for her. At night, we'd talk about what would come next. She told me she'd always wanted to find a way to live closer to her family without having to leave again. I told her that maybe we could think about something together. That might be a way to create a life in Brazil instead of her always having to go abroad just to be able to support them. We didn't know exactly what that was going to be, but we started talking about ideas, things we could try, and whether it was helping her family with something they could do or something we could do together in Recife. It felt very different and surreal at the same time, and I started to get convinced that she loved me just as much as I loved her. I'd never felt that certain about anyone before, and I believed this was going to be the next chapter of my life and something so incredible that nothing could ever go wrong. From the first night in Recife, she stayed with me in the hotel, and it quickly felt normal that she was always there. Just in the way her clothes were in the drawers and her things in the bathroom, and every morning when I opened my eyes, she was there. I couldn't believe it because she was so perfect. I never thought this would happen, so I guess I was just drawn into her beauty. We spent our days together, we'd walk through the city, and often go to the beach, and it was just so amazing. Each evening when we went back to the room, I felt so happy because this was the life I could see myself living forever. I didn't care what England could do for me anymore. I stopped thinking about it entirely. One night, without any plan or build-up, I just told her I loved her and I asked her to marry me. I can remember she paused before she answered, but the way she said yes, I felt like she really loved me and was happy. Everything seemed to fall into place for me at that moment, and it was great. I believed that she loved me immediately. There was no doubt in my mind. And lying there, I just thought about how much my life could change and how much it had changed in such a short time. At 53, I'd found someone who wanted me. and someone who I could share my life with. I never thought that would happen again. She told me that she really did want a life in Brazil. Portugal had only been a way to earn money, and that if we were serious, we could start thinking about how we could make something for ourselves here. I did agree, and without hesitation, because I wanted the same thing. I told her how much savings I had and what that could do, and I felt proud because I believed that I was helping her, yet she was helping me give love that I never felt. I can remember falling asleep and just being so happy that night, thinking that I was going to be married to such an incredible girl. After that night, we started talking about more in-depth things, what we were going to do together, and I didn't know exactly what we were going to do. We were going to stay in Recife and just do something great. She suggested we look for a property close to Boa Viagem Beach, and we could turn it into a guest house. I'd never heard of that idea before, and I never thought I'd be able to do it. But the way she talked about it, it sounded amazing. It wasn't going to be just a couple of rooms, but something that could attract both Brazilian holidaymakers and foreign visitors. She said she'd seen places like that run by couples, and they always seemed to be busy. And she talked about how we could divide the roles between us. I could handle guests who spoke English, and she could take care of the locals. And she spoke about it in a way that made it all sound so easy and possible. She said that we would need to invest properly to start with, and I understood. It had to look professional from the first day, and we couldn't cut corners because if we did, it would fail. I listened to her with complete belief, because her confidence gave me the feeling that we were already starting, and this was going to be amazing. I told her that I had enough money saved to get us started, and she said we would not need to use all of it, but we would need a serious commitment if we wanted it to succeed. When she talked about that, it did fill me with a sense of pride, because I felt like I was doing something worthwhile with the things I had, for me, but also for her. She told me that we should move quickly because properties were often taken fast, and when I was lying in bed that night, I did actually imagine us running this place together, although I didn't know what it would look like. I thought we would be able to keep busy and we had a shared purpose, and I felt happy that I found someone who wanted what I wanted in life. That very next week, we began walking around Boa Viagem and looking at buildings that were for rent. Each time, she seemed to know what she was talking about. She pointed out places that I found and said that this one was good or this one was bad, and I completely trusted her judgment because I wanted to see that I was serious about making a life with her. We spoke to 2 agents who showed us properties, and I remember standing in the empty rooms with bare walls, and she was there explaining how it would look with beds and curtains and signs outside, and for me it was exciting to think what it would be like. I trusted and believed in her completely, because the way she spoke about it, it was as if she knew exactly what she was talking about. When one of the agents said we would need a very big deposit for a 3-year lease, I didn't hesitate. The figure was equivalent to around £25,000, and I did tell the agent that this was doable. When the agent handed me papers, I actually signed them without thinking I was doing too much. I didn't even think what I was committing to, really. When I did, though, she held my arm and said that this was the start. Hearing her say things like that, it made me feel proud because I felt like I'd given her security, the sort that she'd always been waiting for. But also, and more than that, I felt I gave myself something that was amazing and something I'd always been waiting for. That night in the hotel, we celebrated with some wine from the supermarket, and we're just thinking, how are we going to go from here? Everything seemed to be only moving in one direction, and that was up, and I couldn't believe how lucky I felt at that time. When I checked my balance, I knew it was a large transfer I was about to make. But I didn't mind. I just told myself it was the best decision, and it wasn't wasting money, but it was creating the next step. I could find myself living here forever, and this is something I'd always wanted. I did tell myself that everyone has to take a risk in life if you want to move forwards, and this was the risk I was going to take, because it was for something. I can't explain it exactly, but this is what I was thinking. Once the deposit was paid, that's when the spending began to increase because every day there was something new that we needed. I went along with it because I wanted the place ready, and also I didn't want to disappoint her. I was confident we'd make a lot of money. We walked through lots of furniture shops, and she was the one who pointed out everything she thought we needed. When we did that one day, that bill came to around £15,000 for everything. Then we needed air conditionings for each room, and that shocked me with the price, £10,000 in total. But she always used to say that guests would come and expect comfort. If we failed them, they'd never come back. We went to appliance stores, and I paid for refrigerators for each room, washing machines for each room, and dryers and everything we thought we'd needed. And that was thousands again in one single afternoon. As soon as I'm starting to worry, she might notice and then give me a kiss as if to say, "This is great, we're going to have everything we need." Not long after we had signed the lease, we got married in Recife. It was only a simple ceremony, but it felt great to get it done and to be married. It gave me a sense of permanence, and it was that sense that I'd always wanted. She told me once the guest house was ready, we should go on a honeymoon, maybe to Rio or even abroad. And the way she said it, it made me feel excited to think about the future I was building with her and our business that was going to power it. Every night in the hotel, she showed me lists she had written during the day, things we still needed, staff we should hire, and contractors who could do the work quickly. I really admired her ambition at the time and drive because it made me believe we were moving in the right direction. I transferred in more money, £20,000 here, £15,000 there, all of it coming from my account in England, so I could keep up with all these bills. Watching the balance go down, it did start to worry me, but I considered it an investment, it wasn't a loss. I convinced myself that the love I had for her and the work combined would make this more money in the future. This wasn't meant to be a loss. This was meant to turn into something where perhaps we could double or treble this money in only a few years' time. The bills kept coming, and each one seemed to be very big. The builders came in and said parts of the walls had to be redone. The electrician said old wiring couldn't support the load, and the plumber said that the water lines were failing. Every time I paid, I felt very worried because I could see the balance was going down all the time. But I just wanted this to work so badly. I just thought we're so close. The wiring and plumbing together, that was just under £20,000. New floors and paint, £12,000. Exterior lighting and the main sign, £10,000. And then that was before we'd even done anything inside for the rooms. £15,000 on furniture, £10,000 on air conditionings, like I said. So much money was going out. I was starting to think that this is getting scary. But on the other hand, I'm thinking that, well, we've got a business that's going to make us so much money. She talked about staff and how they needed to be ready before opening, so I put money aside to cover the first month and for some emergencies. I just watched all the money going out, and I thought that I was doing the right thing. I can remember just adding everything up and thinking that, well, once it started, things are going to be great. When I did a running total at this point, it was around £155,000. I told myself that this was a huge amount of money, but again, this is an investment. It's not going to be a loss, so don't worry about it. During the final stretch, when we were getting close, one of the air conditioners failed when it was tested, and the replacement for that was nearly £5,000. Then heavy rain pulled water through some seam in the roof, and that was £5,000 again. Then we needed a generator. £10,000 in one hit, and I'm starting to really worry at this point. I didn't know what was going on. Then we need sheets, towels, curtains, and everything that we need, and that's another £10,000. And it is a lot of money going out, but at this point I'm just going along with it, waiting for it to open. By the time I got the entire total, it was around £235,000 that I'd spent, and I had around £20,000 left, and that was it. That was when I really started to worry because I didn't know if we were going to be okay until we started bringing money in. But then she talked about the honeymoon and how we deserved it and we should go. So I couldn't deny. So we went to Rio for a week, and I just tried to forget about everything and look forward to opening and making some money back. That was what it was all about. When we got back, we opened the doors, and the first bookings did feel like it was the start of something good. I told myself that finally money was coming in. But within only 2 weeks, it was clear that the numbers were a lot lower than we'd planned for. The rooms were full on weekends, but during the week they often sat empty. And the booking sites took commission before everything reached our account. so what I saw never actually matched what I'd written down anyway. We set the rate at what she said was fair for the area. I agreed because I wanted the rooms occupied, but after the platform feeds and everything else that went along with that, I just watched the money go down even though we were open. She tried to convince me it was normal for the first months and high season would make everything better. So I did hold on to that and just tried to ignore everything. But the calendar never filled in the way I expected it to, and cancellations came all the time. This was very difficult. I kept a simple sheet on my laptop of occupancy, etc., and it was only around 35%, which was nowhere near what we needed. The average rate was 250 reais, and when I converted that actually reached the account. That was not enough to cover rent, utilities, and the staff. So, what's going on now is out of that 20,000 I have left, I'm using it and I'm eating into it. Then we have to start cutting back on breakfast items, making it simpler, and we stopped buying extras for the rooms. Something breaks and I have to delay replacing it, and I really am starting to get panicked. The power bill needs paying and I'm paying that late because we're waiting for a booking to come in so I can use the money for that. And I spoke to her about raising the prices and she just said no, because we would lose the few guests we had. And I let that go because I trusted her. She seemed to know what she was doing. I started waking up really early in the morning and checking messages, just hoping for last-minute reservations. When one came in, I would feel the sense of relief come over me. Yet, after the costs, it wasn't enough. By the third month, I'd moved all of my savings into the local account, and that was meant to be it, no more. But I knew we were struggling. Then, it all started to get even worse. One afternoon, I was at the little office behind reception, just looking for some printer paper because the receptionist had run out. I opened the bottom drawer of the metal cabinet and I found a brown envelope with receipts all bundled together in rubber bands. I started looking through them because I wanted to see where we were on supplies. I wasn't even searching for anything, but the numbers started to draw my attention. There were receipts and things we'd paid from building supplies and everything we'd done when we were doing the renovation. The totals were smaller than I expected for the months when the heavy work was done. A flooring purchase that showed 14,300 reais when I remembered paying close to £12,000 for floor and paint together. A stack of electrical items at 8,900 reais when the wiring job I paid was almost 10,000 on its own, £10,000. Receipts for air conditioning at 2,300 reais each when I had written down £1,000 per unit in my notebook. I stood there, really confused, trying to remember exchange rates and costs and labour, just thinking that I was mixing up dates and maybe I had done something wrong. But everything I opened, it showed the exact same pattern. Really low amounts for things that I'd spent a lot of money on. In the margins, there were figures written that matched the bigger numbers I'd paid. Some prices were 5 times what the receipt suggested, some were even 6. And I stared at them until my hands started to shake because it started to feel really worrying what had gone on. I did try to tell myself I must be wrong. I was reading these notes wrong, and whatever happened, I was wrong. But it still didn't seem to add up. I pushed the envelope back into the drawer and closed it. I didn't want to just jump to a conclusion. I was really short on cash and I was already paying bills late. I didn't want to start a fight based on something that I didn't really understand. I just had to tell myself that I would ask the accountant to explain it when I had time. And I just walked back to the desk and pretended like nothing had happened. I waited until the staff had gone home and the building was quiet. I took the brown envelope from the door and put it on the bed and asked her to explain all these numbers. At first, she tried to tell me that I was mixing things up, that those were only the receipts and not the full invoices. But when I kept pointing at the totals and the dates and the handwritten figures in the margins, she just stopped talking and sat down on the edge of the bed and said that I wasn't meant to see them because if the business had worked, I would never have known. I asked her where the money had gone and she just said most of it went to her family, her father, her mother, debts, land, repairs, and people who had helped them when things were bad. And then she said some went to her too, because she had nothing when we met and she wanted some security. I asked her if she had loved me and then she shook her head and said, not in the way I thought. She said she cared for me and liked being with me and believed it would grow, but the truth was she needed help and I had given it. And when she saw my face, she added that she loved me now, but none of this would matter once the rooms were full. That's when I started to feel a huge sense of panic like I'd never felt before. I asked her how much money we were talking about, and she just said, a lot. Far more than I would expect if she said the number, and she said she didn't want to. And she just kept repeating that it would be fine when the bookings come in. But it was making things worse, because looking at these receipts, and I don't understand what's going on, thinking that she's taken all this money from me, I didn't know what to do. I told her I'd less than £10,000 left, and she just looked down at the floor and said she thought there was more. She asked me not to give up. She said she was sorry. I'd seen the papers and said she would fix it. I just sat there feeling sick and empty because I realised that the guest house was built on all these lies that she'd concocted to get money out of me. I'd paid all that money and there was no way for me to get it back. The next morning, she said we could move past it if I could just help one last time. A little more money to clear what last obligations the family had, and there'd be no more ever again. She actually took my hand and said she loved me and that leaving now would destroy everything. I just couldn't do it. I told her I was finished and that I couldn't spend another £1 because there was nothing left to spend. Then she started crying and went quiet and said I was choosing pride over love, and that hurt even more because I'd given everything. I told her, though, I was going home. Then she said I was running away. I told her I was broke, I had no money, and I needed to face the truth. She just didn't seem to understand what she'd done. I packed my bag and she watched at the same time. I left the keys on the desk and told the receptionist I'd never be back. I booked the cheapest flight I could, direct to Lisbon and then on to London. I couldn't find anything else to do. That was my last money. On the way to the airport, I just checked the balance and I did have a few £100 left, though there wasn't anything after that. I couldn't believe everything had happened and I just felt so distraught that the love of my life had done nothing but scam me out of all my money using lies and manipulation. I had to send a message to a friend in England saying I was coming back and I needed a place to stay. I turned my phone off, I just didn't want to read anything that the response would say. I couldn't believe it on the way back what had happened. I was in tears most of the flight. When I landed, I just felt so ashamed, so tired that I'd believed someone and I'd loved someone who I thought loved me, yet only loved the money I was able to give them. Don't be like me. Don't fall for their scams and greed. It cost me everything, and ever since then, I've been trying to rebuild, but I'm not close. Greed works different when you're dealing with people who have so little. So I'll say it again, please don't be like me.